And Uri, I'm going to start with you because Meretz is challenging the law with a petition to Israel's High Court. They're joining in with a petition filed by Druze parliament members. And Uri, you were once a leader on Israel's left. You were actually with the Meretz political party. Now you're the founder of the Front, which is a left-wing political group. This is your chance to weigh in and tell us what your beef is with the law.
First of all, I'm still with Meretz, proudly a member of the executive committee of the Meretz party. Look, what's wrong? You define it as if the left is against it. We see attacks on this law from all sectors of the Israeli public. The Israeli president, Rivlin, who's from the Likud party, was very much did a precedent in calling upon the MKs not to legislate something that would harm equality. Moshe Arens, one of the founders of the Likud party, came against it in an op-ed in Haaretz, and so on and so forth. And of course, the Druze, a minority group in Israel, part of the Arab society in Israel, that does serve in the military. And now we see today commanders of battalions in the IDF saying they're leaving service because of this law. And what's lacking in this law? I mean, all those principles, as you said, there's no big change here. What the change here is the change of balance. If Israel, the two pillars of Zionism, is a democratic state and a Jewish state, this law says, let's put the democracy aside. Let's focus on the Jewish nature and extra rights for Jews in several elements. And what it lacks mostly, something that was in the Israeli Declaration of Independence, really a great document that has all the elements of what Israel is and should have been and should be and should continue to be. The promise for equality for all religions, races, genders, so on and so forth.
All right, I want to stop you there, and I want to talk about the Druze issue because, and if we can pull this up on the screen, that would be great. We just had the second of 3 officers in the army who are Druze resigning from their post, and you can see here in the post, it says, "Hello, I am Shady Zaidan, age 23, serving in the IDF for 5 years. I'm currently a deputy company commander in a combat unit. I've served all over Israel. There is no place I've not been. This guy is dedicated. He is a soldier. He's a Druze. Ari, is it worth it?"
So I want to first clarify what the law actually does say and what the law does not say. This law has nothing to do with rights inside Israel. There are laws that are already set inside Israel that are basic laws that basically say that it is absolutely illegal to discriminate. This law defines the state. Now, in terms of the Jews, I tell you, in my unit, I do have some Jewish soldiers, and they're amazing soldiers, and they're amazing people, and they're very, very loyal people to Israel, and I'm very sorry that they've been hurt here, but they have not been hurt by the law. In the past years, they've sang a tikvah. Hatikvah talks about the Jewish soul yearning to come back to the land of Israel. They sing it. They raise the Israeli flag. The things that bothered them was more the noise that came out of this law than what actually the law says. In terms of the Arabic language, by the way, what this law says is that Hebrew is the official language. Nothing that had Arabic on it before will be hurt or changed. That is black and white in this law. The rumors that are coming out of this law are hurting everyone around. And again, I understand where their pain comes from. I have to tell you that around 3 months ago, we named an avenue in Jerusalem after the Druze warrior. I was there. I didn't see the left there. I didn't see Tzipi Livni there, but I was there. And it was empty from the government. I was embarrassed. So with all due respect, this law has nothing to do with anti-Arab or anti-Muslim or anti-Jews at all. It is defining Israel and has no say about the rights of the citizens of Israel.
Okay, now a new poll out from Walla shows that most Israelis do support this law. We can go ahead and pull it up there. You can see more than 50% support the nation-state law. I'm curious, what's your take on this?
50% is not enough. We had a Declaration of Independence, one of the most beautiful documents ever written in the Hebrew language, and I say that knowing about quite a few very special documents that have been written in that language over the last 3 millennia. That declaration was signed and approved unanimously. Nobody should have the arrogance, barring some unusual crisis or some unexpected challenge, to want to revisit what was written so beautifully in a text that took days to prepare, in this reckless, abominable law, which was worked on for 7 years. I heard a minister today complaining, oh, well, we rushed it. You didn't rush it. There were 7 years to work on this thing. It was unnecessary. It created problems where there were none. And there's no reason to take the ambiguous internal peace that upends the entire Israeli democratic order, with all of its superficial contradictions. I actually don't think they're terribly contradictory between the Jewish right to self-determination, which is absolutely crucial, between Israel's democratic nature, between the rights that, as my colleague here says, are already existing in basic laws, but no basic law, by the way, addresses equality yet, even though the Declaration does. To have something that is so far-reaching, even if it's approved by 55%, is reckless in the extreme. We have taken something that was a given to everyone and now turned it into a controversial issue. It's not just that 62 members of Knesset approved this law, it's that 55 have apparently voted against something that the text itself, I agree, is not particularly problematic.
And it is a basic law.
And it is a basic law, which is another problem. There's been an enormous adventurism with basic laws in the current Knesset.
Explain very quickly what is a basic law and why does that have ramifications
here? A basic law is a quasi-constitutional statute. It means that the Supreme Court is able to not only strike down a government decision that's in contradiction with it, but that the Supreme Court is actually empowered now to strike down future legislation, not just acts of government, that it interprets as being in contradiction to the basic law. It also has a higher threshold for amending it. It has to have 61 members of Knesset, not just a majority of those.
And your point, moving on?
My point is that this is a very dangerous, entirely unnecessary move, that people aren't insulted because they're hearing things. They're hearing things from people who advance this law. This law is part of an agenda of the settler right to redefine Israeli democracy as some form of Jewish supremacy. They need it, because their style of life in the West Bank, where Jews are a tiny minority and where they enjoy a monopoly of rights and an enormous gap in the social and material conditions between the Arab majority that's there, can only exist in a situation of Jewish supremacy. We here in Israel do not need that. We can live just fine with a democracy and a state that defines itself as the national home of the Jewish people. We don't need this abomination, and we never did. I understand the pain of anybody who's Druze, and not just Druze, anybody who's Christian or Muslim or any other Israeli citizen, in seeing the majority come and insult it in this way. And they're not misinterpreting the motives. The motives are absolutely clear. I should say one more thing, by the way, about this. That the hardcore of the right-wing agenda in this law, none of it made it through. Not the clause about housing, that was dropped. Not the clause about privileging Jewish law over democracy, that was dropped. Not the clause about, in other words, not the clause about the halakha. They lost what they wanted and still managed to drag us down. It's a metaphor on what the entire settlement enterprise has done to Israeli politics in the last 50 years.
30-second reaction, Ari, because you're the one who has something to talk about with that.
Nothing part of this law that was talked about halakha. There was nothing part of this law that was talking about rights of Arabs. One second, excuse me. One second. I let you talk. You said things that were just not true. I have the law in front of me. If you can point to me a single clause in this law of things that you said, I will raise and vote for you.
That's what I said.
Absolutely, there was no clause about halakha. The clause that does exist in here was about that the courts are based on Jewish system, which already exists in the law of Israel. There was nothing new here. In terms of there was no supremacy.
Hey guys, we've got the law right here.